What is going on? What is going on? Welcome back. Glad to have people come in, join, share, like, do all of that. Come in, join, share, like. Tonight is going to be kind of a recap of what we talked about, the conversations we've had this this season. So definitely looking forward to just having a conversation. Hopefully, people get something out of this conversation, and then I'll let you know at the end what's coming up. But this season is almost coming to an end, so I'm definitely excited about where I've been for this first season. But again, welcome to Coffee and Conversation with your host, myself, Kevin Smith. So we are doing conversation number 12. Cannot believe it's been that many conversations. But conversation number 12, we are talking and doing a recap of season one. So let's go ahead and hop into it. There are no guests for tonight. So that's why doing a recap. We'll have guests next week. So recap of season one. So if many of you recall season one, I started talking about the first conversation was about me, was about what I went through, my mental health journey, everything that I had to face, and just um, taking a moment to be vulnerable to something that I've never done before. I've always been one that doesn't put myself out there when it comes to my personal life, and so I still don't do that. But I have been led to do this, and mental health was the topic that came to me and helped me be able to start this podcast and talk about. So again, just looking at it from that standpoint, I was able to talk about it. And then I remember the next conversation was about just being able to um, build myself back up. And when I think about that, I look at this podcast and I say to myself that it's been a blessing to be able to do this, and be able to speak on this platform. I don't know what the future holds for me, but this definitely has been a building block for me to be able to stand up and do something worthwhile, to talk about something that is really not talked about in the African American community, not talked about amongst men. So I wanted to do something that was worthwhile and that people would want to have a conversation about. So uh, again, that conversation of how do you build yourself back up when you have gone through so much in your life and you're trying to come back from all the things that you went through when it comes to mental health. And so I stepped into that, and going into the conversations that we talked about when we started breaking it down, when we started talking about the veterans and women and men. And so I was so happy to have, and before that, we actually had a social worker come in and help start us off on talking about mental health and just everything that encompasses what it means when it comes to mental health. It's definitely a journey. It's not easy for anyone. Many people won't talk about it. Many people won't um, really explore. How can they get help? Why? Because many of us look at it and say, well, mental health I don't want to talk about because I'm tired of, I don't want to express myself, or that shows a sign of weakness. And so uh, again, it's been one of those things to where I've had to understand through this journey, through this walk, of this podcast, and understanding and seeing so many different people and their lives and their testimony and how they've overcome, and some people still dealing with mental health issues because of certain things that's going on. I started saying this when it comes to mental health. Mental health is something you have. It's not who you are. And so the thing is that when you understand that, and you understand that mental health is something that is just a illness, just like you get a cold. It's an illness, but with the proper medication, the proper help, then you can get to a point to where you're stable and you're good. Now, do people suffer from mental health issues for a while? Yes, it just depends on what they're going through and the situation that happened. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that this can't define you, and it shouldn't define you. And I had to again take that step to say, man, like, this does not define who I am as a person. This does not define who I am to my friends and those who knew before I kind of started talking about it on this podcast. They knew, hey, I have mental health issues that I didn't really talk about because I was, one, ashamed, which is probably one of the top two, three, um, reasons why people don't talk about mental health. And I think when you look at it from a standpoint of a man's perspective, you're looking at it like, man, I don't want to talk about what I'm going through because someone's going to judge, someone's going to look at me different, someone's going to say something. And so I had to realize that and I had to understand it. So I'm telling you, when Ms. Walker came on and we started breaking down and understanding the concepts and the flows of how mental health works and what you go through and all of these types of things, um it really helped me start to understand some things from a standpoint of everyone has their different walks when it comes to mental health, but at the same time we all have to want to seek help. And I think that's the biggest thing is as the conversation started to go on, and we started to have the women come on, we started to have veterans, we started to have the men, and we did, part one and part two of that. And just the understanding, when we came to sports and when we had the Jacksons on talking about sports, and we had Sean Davis on talking about sports, and we had the family talking about the family and how you know the wellness of the family when it comes to mental health and understanding that. These were some deep conversations, and so I hope that that you all um, take or have taken something from one of these conversations, that it has helped you, that is shared it with someone. I hope in the future that these conversations continue because they need to continue. It is not a um, it's not an easy thing to talk about when you talk about mental health and you look at relationships, when you look at the man and going through mental health. It's definitely hard when you look at it from a standpoint of the man going through mental health. So when we touched on it, and we started talking, we looked at just being a father. being a husband, just being somebody that was supposed to be the protector. But when you are going through your own mental health journey, it's hard to try to be that protector for everyone else because you you got so much going on your mind and your brain, and you're just like, man, I don't know what to do. Like I'm at a point to where I'm about to blow up, and I don't know what is going to help me control myself to a point of understanding that this is not something that is easy. It's not an easy fix. It's not an easy fix to understand. I got mental health issues, and one of the things that I continue to learn is we can't help the next person if we ourselves are going through something. One of the things that I understand and know is that how can I pour into the next person when I'm all dried up? It's like going through a desert, and you're going through a desert, and as you go through this desert, and you're walking, you get weaker and weaker because you have not put any water, anything that can replenish you to be able to move on. And so, you're walking through this desert, and as you're walking, the sun is blazing on you. And that sun and mental health aspect represents all the problems that are hitting you, and they're drowning you, and they're seeking you to the point of you can't walk, you can't do anything because it's taking the very life and breath out of your body because you don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. And it's like people are depending on you, and you feel hopeless because you're like, I have to do something. But the thing is, the first thing that you have to do is to talk to somebody, which is means that you have to get help. That you have to understand that through this journey of mental health that you will face those challenges, but you have to understand that you can't give somebody what you don't have. And so I remember when we had the conversation when it came to the women and how they were talking about how being a woman and having to deal with certain things that we as men don't have to deal with. The mental health of protecting your child because you carried them for 9 months, and the understanding of being there to support them because that's that motherly love. And so it's so many things that are wrapped up just as a woman that they have to experience and deal with that as a man you don't, and it's vice versa. As a man, there's things that you have to deal with that the woman doesn't have to deal with. But it's so humbling when I think about when we had the conversation with the wellness of the family with the Bostons, and they, just talked about how they understood, you know, that they couldn't when they talked about their children, and they were saying, "Hey, we had to raise our kids in a different way. All four of them, we had to raise them differently. We had to parent them four different ways." And so it's amazing how, when you look at that, you say to yourself, "Okay, I gotta do this differently." And so when you look at your own life, and what I took from that conversation is when it comes to kids, yes, if you have more than one, you have to you can't parent your first kid like I'm sorry, you can't parent your second kid like you parent your first kid. And so, but I took that a step further and I looked at it life. So I can't go to one person and so two people got the same thing, both of them got depression, but I can't say the same thing to both of them because there's a different strategy, a different way that you have to talk to them. And so I learned that through just what the Boston said with their conversation. And so I took that and I understood that to be something that we all have to look at. We can't approach every situation the same. We want to help people, we want to be there for people, but at the end of the day, we can't approach every situation the same. When someone's going through something, I learned throughout this season is that you have to be there for people. You have to show up for people when you're full. If you're empty, it's hard to show up. But when you're full and you're able to help someone, to show up, and most of the time, it's not a need for you to have to be there to always give advice. I think that that's the biggest thing when it comes to mental health, depression, and all of that. When somebody's going through, somebody always feels like I have to fix it. I'm the fixer, and it's not that. It's the I just need to be there to listen. And I say this, and I said this. Matter of fact, last week to someone at my church, and I said that most people are quick to speak and slow to listen, and we always need to remember to reverse that and say that I am that you need to be quick to listen and slow to speak, because sometimes people are just looking for someone to listen to them. They're not looking for you to fix whatever they got going on. Sometimes people just need someone to vent. Sometimes people just need someone there to help them. I know when I was going through my mental health journey, and I was at my lowest back in 15, 16, all the way through when my dad died in 18. I understood that I just needed somebody. It was like people were coming and they were, trying to fix. You can't fix something that's really unfixable. My parents were gone. But at the same time, I understood that I just needed somebody there. Like just in the physical sense. Like I know people all over the world, but the thing is, it's it's so much better to have somebody physically there with you to help you go through whatever you go through. Because sometimes just that physical presence helps you understand that that's something that you need. And so I understood that, but just understanding that mental health is something that you just can't come to somebody and talk to them and say, hey, it's gonna be okay, and think that that's the fix. Sometimes it's being there with them, praying with them, just being a body there to listen. And I think that we take that for granted because we don't know. One of the things that and I'm sorry, I'm all over the place because again I'm just doing a recap of all the conversations we had, so I'm gonna be going in and out with different conversations. But I remember talking about in the first conversation, and I think I talked about it in conversation two, when I said I just need someone to see me, and it's crazy. At my church, someone said the same thing last week, and it was like, man, okay, somebody actually understands the same thing that I understand. That you have to see the person and really see them. I see that you are hurting, but I got to go deeper than that. I see that you're hurting. I see that you need someone to talk to. I see that you use laughter as a defense mechanism because you don't want nobody to know what's going on. I see that you use telling jokes as a defense mechanism because you don't want nobody to know what's going on with you. And so I had to understand that not only for myself, but for others. And so I started to recognize that with people to tell them, man, I see you. And I had to explain that to people because people say, well, I see you too. No, no, no. It goes deeper than that. I see you. Capital Y, capital O, capital U. I see you, but I see more than what the average person sees. I see the understanding that you're hurting. I see the understanding that you just need someone to listen. I see that you um, use different methods to fight off people trying to come and get close, and you don't want anyone in your space. So you put up a wall to say, I don't want nobody to know what's going on with me. I don't want nobody to know that I have mental health problems. I don't want nobody to know that I'm bipolar. I don't want nobody to know that I'm going through these things. One, because I'm a man and I was taught, I remember my brother, talking about in the conversation part one, and he talked about it in part two when we were doing a conversation with the men in mental health about how we were raised. And we were raised, you don't do all of this emotional type of stuff. You gotta suck it in and just move on. But I realized through doing that it affected me severely, that it messed me up to where I did have more mental health problems, and it increased what I was going through because I didn't express it to no one. I held it in. I felt like I couldn't talk to nobody. I felt that people would judge me based upon what I was going through. And so I had to understand this one thing, that no matter what you go through, people are going to see you, but some people are going to really see you. And the people that really see you are the people that can understand, and they are not going to go away because they see something else that others don't see. And it's okay if people walk away because they were only there for that season. But the people that stay because they see who you are the people that you need to grab hold to, because they're not afraid to sit there and listen to you be vulnerable in that moment. They can understand the vulnerability when you talk to them. They can see your hurt and your pain. They won't use that for their own interests, but they will see you for who you are. They will understand you for who you are, and they will help you through whatever you're going through. And so, when I when I think about that, it's amazing to know that at the end of the day, everyone is not going to be in your corner. Everyone is not going to be around when you're going through your season of mental health. But the people who are in your season through mental health are the people who will be there to help you deal with any situation, any pain that you might go through. So, conversation with the men, and it was again to have to do do a two part because there was so much information, but just understanding the fight of just being a man and understanding um, of trying to be there to show up and understand that it's okay to cry. I always tell people, you know, when it comes to that word cry, Jesus, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. So I always look at it from this standpoint. If Jesus cried, why can't I? How am I better than God? I'm not. And so the thing is, when you cry, you let go and you release whatever's going on. The more you hold inside, the more tension, the more things that you go through. But I think when you start to realize that it's okay to cry, but everyone is not going to be acceptable to uh, that whole thing of showing your vulnerability and all this crying and stuff. But at the end of the day, those who do are the people that understand you. And again, it goes back to what I said. They see you and so they're not going to judge you. So I just remember, when we were talking in that conversation of how deep it was that they were just talking about when we had part two and we had other guests come on, and how we were just going in deeper, understanding the magnitude of mental health, understanding um, the frustrations of um, going through mental health and going through whatever it is that you go through when it comes to mental health. So I was happy to have that conversation, part one and part two, with the men, because there was an understanding that we had to get to a point to where we had to say enough is enough. Let's talk about it. Let's stop the stigma of saying, I don't want to talk about it because I'm a man. I don't want to talk about it because, it's not what we do. And so we had to take the gloves off. We had to, take everything off and really be vulnerable at that time. And I thank my guests for being that, because they were vulnerable at that point. They were able to express things. They were able to see things in a different light, and everyone learned from somebody on um, during that panel with the men. I think everyone learned something through all those conversations. But one of the things that also stood out with me this season was talking about sports. And, I wanted to do that conversation because it was something, um, it was something that really needed to be talked about. I think people don't talk, people see the sports world as people who make all this money, so they should just shut up and color. But I always got to remind people, I am a big Memphis Tiger fan. I support the Memphis Tiger college football team and the basketball team. I love both coaches, and Silverfield, and I love Penny Hardaway, the coaches of those teams. And I I'm on the Facebook page for those for the fans, and I always see people talking about these kids, and I always and I had to put my post in when I get tired of seeing it, to understand that in the sports world, I get it. You're a fan, but there are people too, especially college kids in high school. They're just kids. They're trying to get to the next level. But if we continue to down them, to continue to mock them, continue to say, oh, nothing's wrong with them, no, something's wrong. But we don't want to talk about it because all we want to do is see them play. We want to see them go out there, shoot the hoop, go score a touchdown. I talked about Simone Biles, just looking at all of these athletes, no matter what sport it was, but to understand that they deal with mental health issues too. And not just sports people, artists, actors. I think about Robin Williams and what he left behind because of what he dealt with. And again, any person, no matter if you're famous, no matter if you're just somebody that nobody knows, we all put on facade, and we wear that mask because we don't want nobody to know what's going on with us. I think about, again, Robert Williams. Nobody knew that he was going and he had issues. Probably the people close to him, but in the world, people who were fans of his, no one knew, because he just seemed like a regular guy. He did movies, he joked, but he never showed that side, because the expectation is you're an actor. You got to go out there, do this, do this. Do people really care about this other side of you. And I, if it's just me reaching one person or two people, I wanted to bring some type of, understanding and hope that people continue to have this conversation about mental health, continue to bring awareness to this, because it's an ongoing battle that we face each and every day. One of the things in the Air Force that we do, I'm talking like I'm still in the Air Force, but one of the things in the Air Force that we talk about, um, and really actually in the military, not just Air Force, but in the military, you know, of 22 service members, you know, commit suicide, and that's a high number. One is high for me, um, but it's the mentality, it's the understanding that as a person in the military, you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do, shut up and do what you need to do. But I think people are paying more attention now because of the high rate of suicides and depression, that people are paying more attention to it now, and people are having more conversations. But back when I was going through, it wasn't really something that you talked about on a regular basis. Yeah, we talked about it, but it wasn't something that was talked about and needed to be talked about. And so I tell you, at the end of the day, we have to understand this, that mental health is something that we all need to focus and put our attention on. Not saying we need to focus on it 24/7, but we need to be there. We need to show up for people. We need to understand when people are going through. We need to get out of our daily lives of living in this box, and understanding that conforming to what our daily schedule is, we dismiss sometimes what other people are going through. When you check on people, and that's the biggest thing. I got to go back to that, checking on someone. Um, I used to do it all the time. I used to hit up people all the time, but I think when I started going through what I went through, I stopped. I stopped checking on people because I was battling depression myself. And like I said before, how can I be there for somebody else, and I'm dry? I don't have anything to give. I can't help you. When you say, hey, I need you to listen, I can't. Um I can't you know be there for you when I'm trying to help myself go through something. And so I just want to help people understand that, like, we all have this life to live, but we all have battles that we face. But the thing is, how do you face that battle? How do you face that battle when you get up in the morning and you know that you got this going on, you got this going on? How do you get up each morning and say, I got to face whatever I got to face, and not let it sink to the bottom to where your mental health starts being affected, to where you start questioning a lot of things, to where you really start thinking about, I don't want to be here anymore. One of the biggest things that I want to tell you, and I look forward when we have our panel in a couple of weeks, to really, hone in and just end the season on understanding that we have to continue to talk about this. It can't be, you know, conversation here, a conversation here. We have to get out. We have to have classes. We have to have, forums. We have to have panels. Like, we have to talk about this. It's something that people don't want to talk about because it's something that's hard to talk about. It's something that people get nervous talking about because I don't want to talk about mental health. I don't want nobody to know what's going on with me. But at the end of the day, we have to talk about it. We have to uh, be there to be able to understand that no matter what is going on in our lives, no matter how much um, what we face, that mental health is something that we have to talk about. And so, as we look at, how do we get to a point to where mental health is a normal conversation? To do something like this. I'm not saying everybody has to start a podcast, but what I am saying is to have conversations and have those real conversations, whether it's with your family, your kids at school, like at church, with your friends, with your significant other, but have those conversations. And to really know people, I think this is the biggest thing that I really want to get across to people because it was something for me to understand that at the end of the day, a lot of people did not see me. A lot of people saw Kevin, um, but a lot of people didn't see Kevin Smith. And there's a difference. Like I said, I mean, people saw me and they say, "Oh, well, Kevin's fine. He's smiling, yada yada yada." But it wasn't until I saw my therapist and she pointed out, Kevin, you use the word "I'm good" all the time, but that's a defense mechanism. That's saying I'm good, leave me alone, don't bother me. But when she saw me, it made me realize that somebody finally sees me, and that's all that I ever wanted to see. It wasn't to try to get attention because that's far from who I am. Is to try to get attention from anyone, but to understand that someone sees me, that someone understands and recognizes that I'm hurting, but I don't know how to say it because I don't want no one to think less of me. I don't want anyone to judge me. I don't want anyone to talk about me. Um, or make fun of me based upon my vulnerability, based upon the fact that I'm crying, but to understand that I have someone in my corner. And so, what I will say, and one of the things that I would leave with you on tonight is to say this: be there, show up for someone. Don't take for granted the smile that someone puts on their face, because the smile that someone puts on their face can be a cover up for what they're going through. How I know? Because I've called a couple of people out. Not I don't want to say called them out, but I called out the defense mechanism that they use to cover up their hurt. One of my friends told me, he said, "How did you know?" Because he told jokes. But the thing is, I understood it because I did it. Like I said, my defense mechanism was saying I'm good. People call me, be like, "How you doing?" I would say, "Hey, I'm good," and they wouldn't think nothing else about it because they said, "Well, I mean, he said he good, he good." But if you really want to see past that and get into the deepest, most intimate points of a person and understand that sometimes those words, um, emotions, things that people do, start paying attention. If a person continues to tell jokes, yeah, people say, well, that's just him. But sometimes it's him, but sometimes it's more than that. So we have to pay attention to that because I one of the things that I would hate to see is to see someone I know take their lives because they tried to show it, but no one paid attention. No one saw them. They saw this person that had this great attitude and smiled all the time and just walked around with a smile on their face, but inside they were hurting and they were crying and they were saying, "I just need someone to see me." But behind closed doors, they cried every night. behind closed doors, they thought about suicide every night. But no one knew that and no one saw that. So, when it comes to mental health and when it comes to these conversations that I've had this season, it's definitely been worthwhile. It's definitely been eye opening to talk about the conversation of just what I went through. And I remember on that first conversation, people were like, man, I didn't know you were going through this. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. But I did. Um, I did it because I needed to. So many people was like, Kevin, you got to talk about this. You got to talk about this. You got to tell people your testimony. But at the end of the day, I wasn't ready. People had told me that, 2 or 3 years prior to me even coming up or thinking about doing this podcast. But the thing is, I had to understand that this was not what what I was ready for because I still was healing. And the thing is, when you're healing, sometimes it's hard to talk about what you're going through. I remember a pastor says, you heal while you're helping somebody else, and that's true because on the tail end of me healing, I was still trying to be there for other people, but I was getting the help. I was being fed, so I had someone feeding me while I was feeding somebody else, and it helped being there for someone else, understanding the signs of depression, understanding the signs of, someone who wanted to commit suicide, but understanding that mental health does not define who you are. I gotta say that again, and I hope someone understands this. Mental health does not define who you are. Mental health is just something that you have. Like I said earlier, it's like having a code. But at the end of the day, you take something for that code. At the end of the day, over time, that code goes away. Um, Mental health is the same way. Over time, it will go away. Will you be better? Yes, but sometimes we have to take the long road to get better. And some people don't like that. I know I didn't. I remember when they told me, hey, you're going to be on this medication. And I didn't want to be on the medication. I remember telling one of my friends, I don't want this to be the thing that I have to live off of to feel better. I feel like I should be able to feel a certain way without taking medication to make me feel better. But then I had to understand that that medication was just something to boost me. It wasn't something to sustain me. It was just something to boost me. But the sustainment came from people who saw me. The sustainment came from um, people in my church. The sustainment came from my military frat, but people that surrounded me, the people that really truly cared about me, was my sustainment, was not the medication. The medication helped, but it did not sustain me. And so I just want everyone to understand. I want everyone to know that at the end of the day, there's help when it comes to medication, but there's also help when it comes to people being able to be there for you and being able to see you. And so, I hope that um, these conversations have been worthwhile for you. They have helped you, whether it's my testimony, whether it's talking about how to build you back up, whether it was from the social worker that came on, Ms. Walker, whether it was from our veterans that came on to talk, whether it was from the women that came um, to talk and have a conversation, to our men that came to talk, to the wellness of the family, to talking about sports, and just having those conversations and understanding that those were the things that helped push somebody to get better and help somebody to be able to talk. I That's why I do this. I don't do this. I'm not getting paid for this. None of that. But I do this because it's something that I was led to do, and I'm going to continue to talk um, about different issues. But this season, is talking about mental health. So I'm cutting the show short tonight, but I wanted to come in and I wanted to just do a recap of the understanding of how mental health um, has worked, how mental health has helped. People get to a point to where it's not affecting them so much, and people who are still struggling with it, how do you get help? And so I hope that my guest and these conversations have helped you. I thank you. I thank you all for supporting me. I thank you all for being there, even just sharing, liking my page. I appreciate the support. It means the world to me because I did not see myself doing this a year, 2 years ago, but I thank God and I thank certain people for pushing me to do this. The season's not over. Next week, we're going to do one last um, conversation, um, particularly talking about people who um, have health issues or have dealt with health issues and how that has affected their mental health. My boy, Trill Xavier, how he has cancer and what he's dealing with, and his story, and still being active duty. So that's a testament and what God is doing in his life and how he's continuing to push no matter what. I'm gonna have some other guests on just to talk about their stories and how they got to where they're at and how they're dealing with what they are dealing with. Because health, especially if you talk about cancer and certain things that there's no cure, or there is a cure, but you're going through certain things, and it's taking a while for you to heal. To that messes with your mental health, because it changes your whole dynamic of how you live and how you used to be before you got diagnosed. So that'll be the conversation number 13 next week. And then after that, the following week, we will do the panel talking about mental health, where I will bring back guests from all the conversations that we've had. It's going to be a fantastic, phenomenal conversation, and that will end season one. It's going to be dope. It's going to be conversation number 14 with the panel, the final conversation for the season. So definitely tune in to that, and definitely tune in to season two that will come up. I don't know when yet, but it'll come up within the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that. I'll probably throw those dates out on the last conversation. But I want to say thank you all for your support again. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a blessed week. And until then, have a good night. And the last thing I'll say, no matter if it's early morning, late afternoon, or late night, a cup of Joe and a conversation will always get you right. This has been Kevin Smith, Coffee and Conversation. Have a good night.